Hey folks, welcome back to Gaming Garbage, where we take a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course, stream for fun. Today, I'm talking about the future of gaming looking fake. And while probably most of us aren't going to worry about that too much, I am going to go over kind of what upscalers are, how the tech is implemented into the future of every single gaming device that we're going to have, and then also some of the issues with what upscalers provide. And while it will improve over time, it's not to say that it still won't continue to have more issues. And maybe after a point we won't even be able to tell, but then we're also paying what kind of a price for a fake image? So anyway, we're going to get into all of that. New to the channel, and I've earned it, go ahead and like and sub. But yeah, we're going to start with the Switch 2 first. Now, what an upscaler is basically it is a software program that lowers the resolution natively of whatever you're playing, whether it's a picture, whether it's a video, whether it's a game, and then makes it easier for the hardware to run at a higher frame rate or get more frames per second into it so it looks smoother. And then it artificially upscales the whole thing into a higher resolution so that you're still getting, quote, your resolution and your frame rate. Because they can't actually optimize it to actually, you know, be both. Like it used to be, which is insane, because we used to have games that could run at 60 and actually looked pretty good. And when you go back to some of the old stuff, it's amazing how incredible some of that actually looks. Like Resident Evil 5. It's hard to imagine that that's as old as it is. But anyway, the Switch 2, we found out, has a form of DLSS from NVIDIA, and they're using that as an upscaler. And what's kind of insane, most consoles already dabble in DRS, but Switch 2 takes a more display-aware twist. Rather than treating 1080p and 4K televisions identically, the Welcome Tour demo shows its internal resolution of the display's maximum. Hook the console up to a 4K TV and the game happily renders a 720p image before upscaling. Connect a 1080p monitor and it drops it to 360. Slide the tablet into a handheld mode and the floor plunges to 240. The lower floor minimum solution, the more GPU time remains for simulation physics and effects. Cutting to 1040p might sound extreme, yet modern temporal upscalers alongside with relatively small 720p handheld screens disguise much of the downgrade. The net result, the relatively small screens disguise much of the upgrade. The net result is smoother animation without the distraction of visible pixelation, which is usually true. That's usually true. But I think going forward, there's no way that Nintendo is ever going to have a hardware system that's going to be without an upscaler. I'm thinking even their next Switch 2 OLED or like the Switch 3, it's all going to be focused on really having an upscaler. Now, of course, devs have to be able to use it, implement it well, and all of that, and not all dev studios know how to do that yet. Or at least do that very well. So eventually that's going to change too. They will get better. It will look better. But as we get into the PlayStation 5 Pro, we're going to dig into some of the issues. So PSSR was Sony's own invention to be used for the Pro. And the Pro is basically the PlayStation 5 with double the RAM, double the hardware, and about 1.6, 1.8 more gigs of RAM. But it's the same CPU, it's the same architecture, all of that kind of stuff. The improvement really comes from the upscaler itself. But yeah, previously, reports indicated the AMD's new Fidelity FX Super Resolution 4 would be coming to PlayStation 5 Pro, bringing higher quality upscaling to the system. This isn't quite right, though. The PS5 Pro uses Sony's purpose-built PSSR upscaling tech, not a dedicated version of FSR 4. While it's true that the PlayStation 5's PSSR is built off and derived from AMD's FSR 4, Sony uses its own specialized version that's trained on console-based games and content. So it is technically different, but like Project Amethyst that we're hearing from Cerny is that it's all based off of FSR 4 and it's technically their own custom version, and then they're using it to to train it off of console-based games and content so that it looks better. That's really the idea. So when it upscales, it should excuse me, it should artificially implement that stuff better. It should look cleaner, it should look more complete, less artifacting problems, all of that type of stuff. And again, while I think maybe the PlayStation 6 is the base model is maybe not going to have an upscaler or a lower quality one, the PlayStation 6 Pro will probably have a better upscaler that is going to be some form of PSSR or FSR4 or 5 whenever that shows up. Maybe that'll be 2030 or 2032 or something. Who knows? We'll have to see. But again, I don't really see PlayStation walking away from upscalers. And yeah, I think the thing that sucks is Project Amethyst is really just a replication of FSR4, and Sony's not really putting it anymore. You should really watch Cerny's interview that he did last year in 2025. Also, Xbox, we found out that there's going to be a new type of upscaler or whatever for the next gen. It's going to be AI based, again, and a learning upscaler on how to upscale better. Well, we're going to get it first with the ROG XAX. Xbox's ROG, right? And I wanted to talk about this too. But there will be a difference. It won't be a temporal one. It will be one that is going to be a little bit more efficient, maybe. But yeah, it's called AutoSR. It's best characterized as a spatial post-processing upscaler rather than a temporal reconstruction system. Modern temporal upscalers often rely on additional inputs, motion vectors, depth buffers, and post-frame data to reconstruct subpixel detail, stabilize temporal effects, and produce higher quality results. AutoSR, by design, uses the frame's final image as input and relies on the neural model to infer and restore detail. That makes AutoSR more broadly compatible, but also means that it is inherently different in quality trade-offs and artifact behavior compared with temporal methods. So your upscaling that you're getting is, again, going to be artificial. And that's really to improve the frame rate. Also, we got to talk about the 50 series, because I think NVIDIA and AMD, I don't think they're going to go back either on basically having DLSS or FSR, some form of upscaler. But the thing, too, is while it is technically better, there's been people, too, that have been like, you know what? There's kind of so much stuff going on that, like, my CPU is kind of getting maxed out a little bit, or there's some extra work being done. And to some degree, some games also are playing worse, which is kind of insane. Now, there's also ray tracing coupled in with this. But again, that's not... Yeah, there's so much stuff. Anyway, let me stay on topic. So yeah, one of the cons is that while we don't have, and this is the scale here showing that the 5090, right, is better on every single game than the 4090. But this is really interesting. While we don't have exact numbers on how the 50 series cards will perform in games, there are a few graphs by NVIDIA showcasing performance increases in certain games. However, most of these graphs focus on performance with DLSS, with the only exception being how well Far Cry 6 runs while using ray tracing. This is the only official measurement we have with the 50 series performance with DLSS, and the results are far more impressive. Barely any of the cards show more than a 1.5 increase, with the heavy focus on upscaling calling into question how well they can actually perform without any fancy tricks, meaning the upscaler itself. And this is the point that I really want to focus on, is that while it looks better, while it looks nice, all of this other stuff, it's not real. And it's like, what are we really paying for now? Because are we really paying for hardware, or are we really paying for an upscaler? And that's my concern. And do you want to pay $1,000? Do you want to pay $2,000 for an upscaler? Just an upscaler? Personally, I don't. But again, with the cost of everything going up in 2025 and the inflation that we've had from COVID stimulus and PPP money and all of that from the earlier 2020s, well, we just have a new floor for the cost of gaming. And then on top of copper, silicon, and silver and other metals now being deemed part of national security that are used to actually make all of our hardware, I don't really see upscalers going away at all. I don't see any version of gaming even being without an upscaler going forward, because all of these things are working against it. And then folks like you and I, we just can't afford stuff like we used to. It's expensive. The gas, the food, the insurance, if you can afford insurance. Now it's like, well, great. I either can't afford it or I got to have some dumbed down version of it, which I think is frustrating. And how do you think the 50 series, the 60 series is going to be? And yeah, there's also frame gen and some of these other things that 50 cards have, again, to boost their performance, but they have to start making things to start dealing with latency, which is pretty hilarious because, again, there's so much processing going on in the background that you're actually now starting to create latency. And that's a big deal for multiplayer games or competitive games, whether PvE or PvP. And yeah, now we're making stuff to fix the new issues that we're getting. See what I'm saying? When we're not just having native gaming anymore, it's all artificial, and it comes with its own problems. Some of the other problems that it comes with is that, however, there are also drawbacks to upscaling. One major concern is that the process may introduce artifacts or visual imperfections, and we can actually see this pretty easily in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, such as jagged edges or noise, especially when the upscaling is done using less advanced techniques. Another important consideration is that the upscaling cannot truly recreate missing details that were not present in the original lower resolution content. This means that while the upscaled version may appear visually enhanced, it may still lack the same level of detail as true high resolution content. And we see that. And this is partly why the Auto SR that Xbox is going to have is going to be better, because it's not recreating, it's not restructuring the image. It's just taking the final image and improving it, downscaling it so that the hardware has an easier time making more frames, make it a smoother flow of image, and then re-upscaling that final image so that you can get your resolution. But it's still fake. That's the problem that I have. And this is just kind of the beginning. While some of this is going to be improved, while some of this is going to be better, again, the devs are also going to have to learn how to deal with all of these and use all of these effectively in their game. Because what we got to hear with PSSR in the beginning was that, well, the F1 game didn't actually use FSR, and it actually ran the best, which was kind of backwards. And we've also heard, too, with PSSR, is that some of the devs have implemented it. It makes the game look worse, and so they remove the patch. So devs have to learn how to use it. They also have to put in the patch to be able to use the upscaling technology and all of that. So going forward, that could be kind of an issue with, again, just needing things to be improved and optimized, or implement the upscaler patch in order for the game to actually run good. So you could still go forward and buy a $70 game and not have it run well because it's unoptimized, because the devs aren't actually trying to optimize it for the hardware. They're working on an upscaler patch that is still going to give you some artifacting, some imperfect image quality, and blurrier lines or jagged areas that are not going to fit and work that well. Now, in the grand scheme of things, most people probably aren't going to tell. So even sometimes when there's enough chaos on the screen, I can't tell either, okay? I'm not like some fancy guru that's got like a perfect, amazing eyes. No, that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that ultimately, part of the issue that we have with game design is that we had 480p. This is what it looked like. And scaling the resolution, how many pixels there are, you can see that it's gotten pretty big. So I wish 720 was in here, but it's not. But we did have 1080 for a while. But again, that was like, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8 times the pixels. That's kind of insane. That is a ton more pixels to process for the hardware. And then we made a jump to 4K, which is 4 times more pixels than 1080. Look at the size of that. And we're struggling. This is why I think some of the issue is present, is because nobody complained when Elden Ring came out and the resolution was 1080p. Nobody. The game looked beautiful. It ran okay. They did improve that. There were some multiplayer issues, which they patched, but nobody complained about it 1080p. And I think the thing is that people couldn't tell. They couldn't tell that it wasn't 4K. The 4K patch came later. And when the patch did come, again, nobody could tell, nobody cared. But again, when you're adding that many more pixels, well, this is why upscalers have come into the forefront, is because of 4K, because the jump is so big. And then we've added ray tracing, and then ray tracing 2.0. And then we've added some other stuff in there too, I'm sure. So there's all of this extra stuff that's got to be processed for maximizing graphics, just pushing all of this stuff, and then we're finding out, the hardware's having a hard time. People are complaining about stuff. Devs don't know how to optimize because a ton of them retired during COVID, and now we have a whole bunch of kind of newer sets of guys that don't have the previous experience like the others did. And so now we're creating these upscalers, we're creating these other things. It's actually for 1440p, not 2160, so that would be like in here somewhere. Or again, like Elden Ring, where it's 1080p. And again, people can't even tell. But if they're going to sell me something, a 4K at 60, that's what I want. That's what I'm buying for. That is the notion that I have in my head of why I'm spending the money that I'm spending. And for you and I, with things being more difficult and frustrating, with the cost of living going up like it is and continuing to go up like it is, I want to actually get what is marketed to me. Otherwise, it's lying, right? In capitalism, that's called fraud. And then they're kind of just trying to blanket over with upscalers, which I'm not a fan of. And then, bro, if there is, and I bet it's going to be Sony first, if there's anybody that is going to push to 8K, we don't need it. You don't need any 8K TV until you're getting to like 70, 80-inch TVs. Huge. Absolutely huge, right? Which is not most of the people. Most people probably have a 4K TV, and it's probably in the 40s, 50s, or 60s, and it's perfectly fine for the viewing distance that they have. But they will push this. They will push this. And with this also comes the price. It will go down a little bit, but again, these are thousands of dollars now. This is like $2,000. Really nice ones, $2,000. Really nice ones, $8,000. Or $6,000. If you want a mid-grade, you can get $3,000 or $4,000. Which is just insane, right? It's just utterly ridiculous. And then again, when we push to 8K someday in the future for gaming, it's just going to make all of the problems worse. The 4K upscalers, well, they're not going to be able to handle this. So they're going to have to learn 8K, and again, what are we paying for? It's not an actual improvement. Again, it's creating more latency with DLSS, with the 50 series. It's creating other issues like artifacting and blurry images. So again, I still think the Auto SR is cool, and we'll have to see how that is. Digital Foundry, by the way, on YouTube is probably going to take a look at this actually when it launches, when we get our next-gen consoles. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not overly happy about paying $1,000 or $1,500 potentially for a next-gen console, or paying over $2,000 now for a computer, a pretty good computer. You don't have to upgrade next year or the year after. And dang, man. I mean, it's just, what are we paying for? And the thing is that with Nintendo, PlayStation, Xbox, and gaming, PC gaming, I really think upscalers are permanent, because I don't think anyone can really afford what it costs to get that true performance and just buy the hardware outright. And while most people probably don't care about the upscalers themselves, it's like buying a physical disc of a game on console or like PC back in the day, and then realizing the game data isn't on the disc. So what's the point? And it's the same thing for the upscaler. And I think eventually, probably myself included, won't care because there won't be any other options in the future. But that's what it feels like. I'm not buying a physical copy. I'm buying a disc with no data on it. I'm not actually buying the game files. I don't have access to that. And again, you're not going to have access to the real image. I'd like it if you could actually turn some of that stuff off. With PC gaming, you can, or you can switch to something else that maybe looks better. But again, if you're playing a game and the patch was messed up, or it wasn't implemented yet, or stuff wasn't optimized for the hardware, brick. Again, what are we paying for? Is it worth paying the cost? I don't know. And I think a lot of people going forward with the next gens, I think there'll be a massive push, kind of like there's been with the Switch 2. And then with the PlayStation and Xbox, I think there's going to be some enthusiasts that are go out and buy it right away. So there's going to be a big spike. And then other people are like, the games are still made for PlayStation 5 and Series X. Why would I upgrade? I'll just wait. And this is where, this is all getting so ridiculous. This is where the performance, the graphical improvement just really doesn't matter anymore. But they have to keep pushing it because, again, what else are they going to sell you? Every time there's a 60 series, a 70 series, an 8K TV, the next generation of console, well, they got to sell you something. Otherwise, what's the point of buying it? And I think we're getting there. And so then the hardware manufacturers, I think, are going to, in the future, maybe within the next decade, are going to actually have trouble selling hardware. Doesn't that sound crazy? Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. So thanks for tuning in, folks. I'll see you guys on the next one.